Welcome to the deep dive, where we take your sources and really pull out the key nuggets of knowledge for you. Today, we're diving into a criminal case that's, well, it's genuinely extraordinary. It didn't just solve a crime, it actually fundamentally changed forensic science around the world. Imagine this, a murder case. And the main piece of evidence, the thing that cracks it wide open, it isn't a fingerprint or a weapon, not even human DNA. It's something a bit furrier. We're talking about the Snowball case. It's this incredible story of how cat DNA, believe it or not, became crucial evidence and just, rewrote the rules.
That's right. And our mission today is to really unpack how this whole thing unfolded for you. It goes from a missing person report all the way to a major scientific breakthrough. You'll see how some real ingenuity, a lot of persistence, and critically, a bunch of white cat hairs led straight to conviction. It's just a fascinating example of how knowledge applied in a new way can solve what seems impossible.
Okay, so let's set the scene. It starts under pretty grim circumstances, doesn't it? We begin in October 1994. Shirley Ann Duguay, she was a 32-year-old mother of 5 living on Prince Edward Island in Canada. Her family reported her missing, I think it was October 3rd. And then just days later, October 7th, her car turns up. Abandoned near Tyne Valley. What was the state of the car? What did they find there initially?
Yeah, it was definitely a worrying discovery. The car's license plates were gone, and inside there was obvious blood spatter on the windshield and the interior. It immediately screamed foul play. But, finding the car was just the start. The really grim discovery didn't happen until much, much later, May 6, 1995. So 7 months passed before they found Shirley Duguay's body. He was in a shallow grave in a wooded area, partially decomposed, and the details were stark. Her hands were tied behind her back, and the cause of death was strangulation.
Just awful. 7 months. But you mentioned, amidst all that horror, something crucial was found near the body. This is where the story takes a turn, right?
Exactly. Near the grave, investigators found a plastic bag. Inside, a man's leather jacket. And this jacket, well, it was covered in Shirley Duguay's blood, but that wasn't all. Also on the jacket were more than 24 white hairs, cat hairs. And right away, those hairs became, the most interesting, maybe the most compelling piece of evidence they had, even if they didn't know exactly what to do with them yet.
Okay, so you've got this really disturbing scene, the body, the bloodstained jacket, and these white cat hairs. How did they even start connecting that to a person? Was there an immediate suspect who maybe had a white cat?
Well, this is where some sharp police work comes in, maybe a bit of a good memory, too. The RCMP investigators are going through their files, looking at interviews, and they remembered something. Douglas Leo Beamish. He was Shirley's estranged common-law spouse, father to 3 of her kids. And in a previous chat, he'd mentioned owning a cat. A white cat.
Wow.
Named Snowball. Suddenly, this little detail, it just clicked. Those white hairs weren't just random anymore. They could be a direct link.
Okay, that's a huge potential connection. But like you said, using animal DNA in a trial back in 94, 95, that just wasn't done, was it?
Not at all. It was completely new territory for forensics. I mean, human DNA profiling was moving forward, sure, but using pet DNA, especially in court, total unknown science at the time. It had never been done successfully anywhere.
So how did they even approach that? You can't just invent a forensic test overnight, can you? Where did they turn?
They had to get creative.
Yeah.
Really creative. They reached out to a place called the Laboratory of Genomic Diversity, which sounds maybe a bit odd at first because this lab wasn't focused on crime scenes. Their specialty was actually genetic diseases in animals, conservation genetics, that sort of thing.
Right, that does seem like an unusual choice. So why them? What could a lab studying, say, genetic diseases in cheetahs offer a murder investigation?
It's because the core skills were transferable, you see. What that lab was brilliant at was isolating and analyzing very specific bits of DNA to find variations. Whether those variations pointed to a disease marker or, in this case, could potentially identify an individual cat. The basic lab techniques, the molecular biology, it's fundamentally similar. For human forensics, scientists look at markers called STRs, short tandem repeats. These are patterns unique to individuals. For Snowball, they first had to figure out what the equivalent markers were. In cats, nobody had mapped them for forensic use. Then they had to develop ways to pull out and copy just those tiny sequences from maybe just a few hairs found on that jacket.
That's incredibly complex work. Developing the method is one thing, but how did they make sure it was scientifically solid? Enough to convince a judge and jury. How do you prove this specific cat hair came from this specific cat and not some other random white cat on the island?
Ah, yes, that was absolutely critical. And the way they tackled this really set a standard. They didn't just test Snowball. They implemented what you could call a fail-safe. They went out and collected DNA samples from about 20 other cats, just randomly selected from around Prince Edward Island.
Okay, why was that so important? The random sampling?
Because PEI is an island, right? There was a chance the cat population might be quite inbred, genetically very similar. So they needed to know how much genetic diversity actually was there among the local cats. If all the cats were basically cousins, then a match to Snowball wouldn't mean much. It could have been his brother, his sister, some other relative, maybe any number of white cats on the island. By testing those other 20 cats, they could establish a baseline. They can say, look, these feline genetic markers are diverse enough on PEI. It allowed them to calculate the statistical probability, the odds that this hare could have come from another cat besides Snowball. That step, that population study, was vital for making the evidence stand up in court. It proved the match wasn't just a fluke.
And the results. Did this massive effort pay off?
It absolutely did. The tests were conclusive. The specific DNA sequences they identified in the hairs from the jacket, they were a perfect match.
Yeah.
Perfect match to Snowball. There was basically no doubt left.
So, with that scientific confirmation, the case against Beamish solidified. What was the final outcome?
Douglas Leo Beamish was convicted. Second-degree murder. That was July 19th, 1996. He received a sentence of 18 years to life. He served that time, a life sentence, mostly in an Ontario prison.
And that conviction stuck. No successful appeals.
He did appeal, yes. Tried in 1998 and again in 1999, but both were rejected. His parole request in 2013 was also denied. He was eventually released, actually quite recently, in July 2025, after serving 29 years. Released to a halfway house with conditions, including one that he's not allowed to return to Prince Edward Island.
Wow.
Yeah.
29 years. And it all pivoted on that cat hair evidence.
It really did. And the historical impact of this case, the Duguay case, it's huge. It literally was the world's first successful use of non-human DNA in a criminal trial. It wasn't just about solving one murder. It created the blueprint. It showed how different scientific fields, genetics and forensics, could come together. And it established really firmly that animal hair could be reliable forensic evidence if the proper scientific rigor, like those population studies, was applied.
What an absolutely incredible deep dive. The Snowball Case. It just perfectly illustrates how science, especially forensic science, is always evolving, right? And how sometimes the most, unexpected clues can lead to the biggest breakthroughs. A few cat hairs changing legal history.
Exactly. It really underscores that idea that knowledge is powerful, but it's applying that knowledge sometimes in really novel ways that makes the difference. Critical thinking connecting those dots. And it also cemented the need for that rigorous validation, the population databases, for any new kind of DNA evidence. That became the standard. Just proves, doesn't it? Sometimes the tiniest details, things you might easily overlook, like some white cat hair, can be the key to unlocking enormous mysteries.
So, thinking about this, what does it mean for you listening? Maybe consider how often seemingly small, maybe even insignificant details around you might actually hold the key to understanding something much bigger. Or how an area of knowledge that seems really niche, like, cat genetics, how could that suddenly become incredibly important in a field like criminal justice? The Snowball Case is a great reminder, I think, to look beyond the obvious. Sometimes the most groundbreaking solutions are hiding in plain sight, or maybe just clinging to a jacket. Keep exploring those connections.